WCAT candidates debate for the 5th District State Senate election, which is Tuesday, November 8th. My name is Bill Carroll. I'm your moderator for this evening's debate. The two candidates this evening are Senator Jason Lewis and Town Councilor Ed Dombroski. Tonight's debate has been available for cable broadcast throughout the district. We would like to thank the Reading Community Television, Stoneham TV, WinCam, Winchester, MMTV of Melrose, and Urban Media Arts of Malden for sharing this throughout the district. It will also be streaming live on WCAT, Wakefield, and Facebook and YouTube. WCAT reached out to all the local newspapers within the district for participation in the questioning of the debate of the candidates this evening. We have with us this evening from the Wakefield Daily Item, Bob Burgess. And we also had from the Wakefield Patch, Dakota Antelman, field editor for the Patch. Dakota is unable to attend due to a family emergency, but Dakota submitted questions, and in Dakota's absence, Ann Santos, who is Associate Dean of Students at Suffolk University Law School and a former Wakefield Town Councilor, has agreed to ask questions for the purposes of this debate. There will be no opening statements this evening. A question will be asked of the candidates by one of the panel. Halfway through, we'll switch, so each candidate has an opportunity to be asked a question by a different panelist. The candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to the question. Following that response, the candidate will have 1 minute to a follow-up. To allow for as many questions as possible, we encourage the candidates to focus on the question at hand. The questions have not been provided in advance, and the questions, they'll be relevant to issues throughout the district. At the end of the debate, each candidate will have a 2-minute closing statement. To move these along, we've done these debates for quite a few years here in Wakefield. We try to stick to the 2 minutes. As you know, political candidates, some have the ability to go on and on. So what I will do is, just so you know, I will give them a silent sort of notification that they should be wrapping up, okay? Don't look at me, gentlemen. That's just to move things along. If I'm compelled to sort of end a monologue, it has nothing to do with either candidate. It's merely a matter of time. As I've mentioned to the audience prior to coming on the air, we will remain quiet throughout the debate. No comments, cheering will be tolerated. And I'm pretty sure, I'm confident from looking around that will be complied with. Otherwise, we have the local Wakefield constabulary here to make sure that we have compliance with that. We have no signs and no questions from the candidates from the audience. That's for some other forum. Okay, to start things off, we had a coin toss, and Ed Dombroski gets the first question from Bob Burgess. Bob?
Ed, the district's hospitals are extremely busy, and the healthcare industry in general seems overwhelmed. A lot of people need attention and are having trouble getting it. What can the legislature do to help?
First off, Bob, thank you for the question. Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Thank you to WCAT for hosting this tonight. Thank you to our questioners, Dean Santos and Mr. Burgess. And of course, good evening, Senator Lewis. I appreciate you coming for at least 60 minutes for a debate. I realize this is the only one you're agreeing to. It's an important question, Bob, because our healthcare system is a really critical component of our quality of life here in Massachusetts. Massachusetts has some of the best hospitals and healthcare facilities in the country and in the world. I was speaking with someone recently in Reading who was talking about the fact that children from Ukraine were actually coming here to Boston because of the quality of the healthcare that we provide. So we have been a leader, and we need to continue to be a leader in that front. And I think there are a number of things that we can do within the legislature relative to healthcare. One is making sure we have access to care. Another is making sure that we are taking the right steps to ensure that we have access to preventative care. Because like so many things that we deal with in our cities and towns, If we get ahead of the issue, it's far more manageable. And candidly, it's also far more cost-effective. So I think we have a real opportunity within our district and within our state to be a leader on that front. I think we should look at community hospitals to see what role they can play to provide expanded access to our residents within our communities. I think we should look at ways in which we can support funding so that those that are on fixed incomes or perhaps those that are without the resources are not denied the coverage that they deserve, rightly so. So I think it's a multifaceted approach, Bob. Unfortunately, it's not something that we can consolidate in 2 minutes' time, but the bottom line is there are opportunities for access. I am proud to be endorsed by Governor Baker in this race because he knows I'm a common sense leader who will find solutions to the problems that matter to us in our communities. This is an important issue in our communities. We're losing staff. We're losing access. And these are things that we can improve upon. These are things that, as your next state senator, I commit to doing. I see my time is up.
Thank you. Senator Lewis, 1 minute follow-up.
Thank you, everybody. It's great to be with you tonight. Thank you to my opponent. Thank you to WCAT, Bill Carroll, and Santos, Bob Burgess, and of course to our audience, both here in person and watching from home. You know, it's kind of ironic that you started with this question because I spent most of this weekend actually in the hospital with my wife, who kind of had an emergency, and we had to take her to the emergency room. She stayed overnight. Fortunately, she's doing fine, but I certainly got to see firsthand a reminder of how stressed our hospitals are. They were so busy that they weren't even able to admit my wife to a bed. She had to stay in the emergency room. The nurses are doing just Herculean work. They have been for over 2 years through the pandemic, as well as the physicians and other staff. Look, I only have a very little time left on this question, and we could spend the entire debate on healthcare. But let me just say that I believe that healthcare should be a basic human right, that every person from cradle to grave should have access to high-quality, affordable healthcare. That's what I've been committed to throughout the time I've served in the legislature. That's what I will remain committed to striving for if I'm reelected.
Thank you.
you.
Ann, your question to Senator Lewis.
Senator Lewis, businesses and individuals in the 5th District are feeling the impacts of inflation, supply chain issues, and other economic concerns. We know that some public building projects will also be impacted. What have you heard from voters about these concerns, and what can you do in the legislature to help them?
Great. Thanks, Ann, for that really important question. Look, folks have been through an extraordinarily tough time the last couple of years, and that includes families, that includes businesses, that includes our local governments. And the combination of dealing with the health crisis and economic dislocation, and now the extreme pressures on cost of living from inflation, whether it's food prices, gas prices, also the very high cost of housing, healthcare, childcare that we deal with in the greater Boston region are very significant challenges. These issues of supporting poor and working class families has been central to my time in the legislature. Just a few examples. Earlier this year, I helped to support and champion a $500 million tax relief package in the state Senate. That includes an increase to the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is the most successful tool for fighting poverty. It includes an increase in the dependent care deduction for working parents, the rental deduction for people who are renting, and also to help our seniors, an increase in the senior property tax circuit breaker. I also have done a lot to address housing needs. We have increased subsidies for housing and also allocated hundreds of millions of dollars to support more affordable housing development and to support our housing authorities. I led the effort to create a paid family and medical leave in Massachusetts, and for that, along with former Representative Paul Broder, was named a Bostonian of the Year by the Boston Globe to ensure that parents don't have to choose between caring for their baby and bringing home a paycheck. I also led the effort to create a $15 minimum wage, and we are on the way to achieving that here in Massachusetts to help get closer to a living wage. I will continue, if reelected, to do everything possible to support our working families, again, whether that's the cost of health care, housing, child care, and more generally, the cost of living.
Thank you. Councilor Dombroski.
Thank you. I think the challenge, Senator Lewis, is that you haven't delivered on those things for our communities. You've had 13 years on Beacon Hill. And to answer your question specifically, what am I hearing in the district? I am hearing that people are hurting and they need relief. And I'm here tonight to say, I hear you, I am with you, and I will work for you, period. My opponent likes to talk about platitudes. He's a far-left progressive ideologue. And that's fine. I respect that. I'm not. The majority of our district is not far-left progressive ideologues. They're sensible, hardworking people. When I was out knocking doors just the other day, I heard from a woman say, I want to see my money work as hard as I do. I don't think she could have hit the nail on the head any more squarely. That's what we need in our leadership. We need a leader who will go to Beacon Hill, who will be our voice, be our champion, and set his priorities aligned with the priorities of those he represents.
Thank you. Bob Burgess, next question.
The state has been collecting tax revenue at record rates. Should some of that money come back to the taxpayers or be used to support vital initiatives across the Commonwealth?
Questions to Ed? Ed? Yeah.
The answer is simple. It should go back to the taxpayers. It's your money. We have a legislature that my opponent is a part of that can't even find ways to spend the money that it currently has. We have a rainy day fund over $6 billion, the most we've ever had. We have $2.2 billion in ARPA, federal funds, from COVID-related relief that has not even been spent. And we're looking at billions in surplus for our state budget, to the point where the 1986 Act that was voted on and approved by the voters, 62F, is now primed and ready to go. But you have leaders like Senator Lewis who are looking for any way possible to grab onto that money and to not release it back to the taxpayers. I fundamentally disagree. This is an opportunity to help the people who are hurting. And I'm talking to all of you at home tonight and all of you in this audience. Are any of you in better position today than you were 13 years ago when Senator Lewis first came onto Beacon Hill? Are your property taxes higher? Are you finding it harder to make ends meet? Are your utilities going higher? Are you concerned about the cost of heating your home this fall and winter? Because those are the issues I'm hearing about. Those are the issues I care about. And any and every way that I can make sure we have comprehensive tax relief and tax reform for both individuals and small businesses, I will be a champion of that, because that's what matters. It is your money, and I fundamentally believe that you know how to better spend it than a bunch of politicians on Beacon Hill, period. And you will have a champion who will deliver for you on that, because my priorities are your priorities. And I assure you that my competition will not set his priorities to align with yours, because he's had 13 years to do it, and he's failed.
Thank you. 1 minute follow-up. We're going to go with Jason and Ed from here on out, okay? 1 minute follow-up, Jason.
Look, I've been around for a little while, and like all of you, I've seen our economy go through ups and downs. I remember very vividly the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, and what that did to our communities, our businesses, and how it created our state tax revenues. Yes, it's true. We are in a good position right now and very happy to be in that situation. And the state does have a surplus. A lot of that is due to very extraordinary conditions during the pandemic. For example, all of the money that flowed into the state from Congress and President Biden to help us get through the pandemic. I fully support returning the $3 billion to the taxpayers of Massachusetts that is required under the 1986 so-called 62F law. That money will be going out the door to taxpayers starting in November. As I said earlier, I also voted earlier this year for an additional $500 million in tax relief for working class families in our communities and across the state, and I do expect that that will get across the finish line in the near future.
Thank you. Next question. Ann?
Senator Lewis, is there a specific moment or conversation with a voter that has stood out and impacted you during this campaign?
That's a great question. And one of the things that I pride myself on in the time that I've been in office is being very accessible to my constituents. I hold regular office hours every month in person in each of the communities in our district. I also hold virtual office hours. I hold town hall events and welcome meetings, sitting down with constituents, for a cup of coffee or any other opportunity to hear what's on their minds. One of the conversations I had recently was with somebody who's in his early 20s and trying to figure out, how is he going to be able to continue to live, to purchase a home, raise a family in, I won't say which community it was in, but it was one of the communities in our district. This is a conversation we were having during the campaign. This person is, like many young people, struggling with the debt that he had to incur to attend college. And this wasn't even an expensive private college. This was a public college in Massachusetts. But he has to deal with how is he going to make those payments, how is he going to also be able to, again, start to save, to buy a house, or just to be able to afford rent. And so we talked about the things that we have done to try to make the higher education more affordable, and my plans to continue to invest in that area. We talked about my leadership in the state Senate in working to provide high-quality, affordable early education and child care for all families. In fact, I recently, as the chair of the Education Committee, led the passage in the state Senate of a transformational bill to expand access to high-quality, affordable child care. And we also talked about my work to pass universal paid family and medical leave and what we need to do to continue to build on that going forward.
Thank you. Ed, 1 minute follow-up.
There are so many stories I could tell, and 1 minute won't do it justice. One that comes to mind is a woman that I spoke with just the other day at the senior center. And she told me that she had to sell her car because she couldn't afford the gas. What is wrong with us when that is happening to our seniors? Seniors should be able to retire with dignity. Seniors should not be under the added pressure of not knowing where the money is going to come from for their most basic essentials. At a time when on Beacon Hill we have billions of dollars in surplus, and I have an opponent who over the past 13 years has never met a tax he doesn't want to impose upon you. What are we doing wrong? What we're doing wrong is not having the leadership that we deserve on Beacon Hill. You need a voice for your neighborhoods. You need a voice for your communities. I will be that voice. My opponent has not been that voice for our communities and is either unwilling or incapable of doing so.
Thank you. Bob, next question.
Question 1 on the November 8 ballot would institute a 4% state income tax on people making $1 million or more. The legislature would use it to supplement funds for education and transportation. Do you support the additional tax?
I am so glad you asked this question, Bob. The answer is no, and I'll tell you why. Senator Lewis is a lead sponsor on what is known by many as the tax hike amendment. So let's be clear on the facts. The tax hike is an 80% tax hike on seniors, homeowners, or small business owners. Now, you will hear, oh, it's just the billionaires. Not many people are affected by it. That's not true. Speak to a small business owner. Most small business owners end up having their business set up such that they run through all of their income on their individual tax returns. And for most small businesses, that's their nest egg. People spend oftentimes generations to build wealth within a business. And I see small business owners in this crowd tonight nodding along with me. And to think that they are going to be hit with an 80% tax increase, or a senior who sells their home with a ton of equity in it because of the housing market as it is now, is going to be hit with an increase. But most importantly is the deception of question 1. And it's based on 3 words: subject to appropriation. So for those who may not be familiar, Senator Lewis supported this constitutional amendment, subject to appropriation. So you hear, oh, it's going to be for education and transportation. There is no guarantee that a single additional penny will be allocated towards education or transportation. You can look it up. You can read the constitutional amendment. as drafted. Now, Senator Lewis says, well, it needs to be. That's a belief he has. That's not what the law provides for. Fortunately, Representative Michael Witz was honest with the Boston Globe and acknowledged, in fact, yeah, you know what, we're going to try, but we don't know. It's a blank check for legislators on Beacon Hill, and worst off, Senator Lewis had the opportunity with an amendment that would have required a trust fund set up so all those funds go towards education and transportation. And you know what he did?
Thank you.
He voted against the
Thank
amendment.
you.
Bob,
Jason, 1 minute follow-up.
Bob, thank you so much for asking this question, because you finally got my opponent, after 7 months of campaigning, to actually take a position on an important public policy issue. 7 months have gone by.
You've not been following.
And my opponent has not taken a position. Nowhere on his website or anywhere did he take a position on any important issue, including this critical issue of ballot question 1, also known as the Fair Share Amendment, which I am proud to be the lead Senate sponsor of, and I've been working to pass for the past 8 years. My opponent parrots the lies and the fear-mongering of the billionaires like Bob Kraft and Jim Davis, who are spending millions of dollars to fund the opposition. Quite the contrary, this will place a modest additional 4% income tax only on annual household income above $1 million a year. And that amount of money will help to fund our public schools, it will help to support making higher education more affordable, and the investments we need to make in our transportation system.
Thank you. Next question.
Senator Lewis, how will the recent Dobbs decision inform how you vote in the legislature?
The recent Dobbs decision was an absolutely devastating blow to people all across this country, including here in Massachusetts. The right to abortion, the right to reproductive health care, was protected by our Supreme Court in 1972, and that stood for 50 years across this country. This right-wing Supreme Court, in one fell swoop, struck that down. What is happening in some states of this country that are led by Republicans is just heartbreaking to see, where women are being told that there may be no circumstances they can get abortion care, even in the case of rape or incest. Fortunately, here in Massachusetts, we are much more enlightened. And I'm proud that in 2020, anticipating what might happen with the Supreme Court, we passed a very important law known as the Roe Act. And I was proud to help champion that in the state Senate. And that fully protects access to reproductive health care in Massachusetts, no matter what the Supreme Court does. By the way, Governor Baker vetoed that bill. Governor Baker said, no, we don't need to protect abortion, access to abortion in Massachusetts. It was thanks to Democrats in the legislature that we overrode that veto, and the Roe Act is law today. And then, in July, in a decisive move to respond to the Supreme Court decision, we passed another bill which is going to make sure that patients and healthcare providers are fully protected from any liability from other states like Texas that are trying to go after them. Also included in that bill was a bill that I filed to expand access to medication abortion on our college campuses.
Thank you.
I have been a champion of reproductive rights throughout my career, and if you elect me, you can be assured you will have a champion for reproductive health care and justice in the state Senate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ed, 1 minute follow-up.
Women's reproductive rights are protected here under law, that law has been codified. It is settled law in Massachusetts, and I support that. I support women's reproductive rights. It's an important issue. I think the Dobbs decision brought to light a lot of concerns, a lot of fear, and I understand that. Fortunately, we are in a situation, and I should point out that Governor Baker actually had executive orders that came out soon after that decision relative to making sure that we can address the issue of people coming from out of state, potentially, for instance, and insulating them from liability, any healthcare providers that provide those services. But it's an important right to the women in our communities. I've spoken to a lot of women in our communities about that. I respect that this is a very difficult issue, and it's also an incredibly personal issue. And I realize that every woman that has to make that decision has to make it with a lot of deliberation, and it's a really hard thing to do. And I won't pretend to understand it fully, but I will say I will champion it and I will support it.
Thank you. We are almost at the halfway mark, so Ann now to Ed, is that correct? I never get this right? Yeah, you've been asking Senator Lewis, correct? So now you'll ask Ed. Okay.
Correct.
Jason and Ed. Okay. Your question is to Ed.
Ed, what are some projects in the 5th Middlesex District that you would like to see release state funding if you are a state senator?
Sure. If I could just, one clarification too, when I was saying earlier, I can't pretend to fully understand it. I say that because I'm not a woman. So I'm saying a woman going through that process, I'm not going to pretend to put myself in the mind of a woman. It's heart-wrenching, I know that. That much I understand, and I support whatever decision a woman makes. With respect to the projects, I'm glad you asked this question, Ann, because this is perhaps one of the biggest differences between me and my opponent. My opponent likes to fancy himself as the champion of education. He mentioned today that he was the chair of the Joint Committee on Education. The issues we have, though, relate to school funding. And that comes in two forms. It comes in Chapter 70, and it comes through the MSBA. With respect to Chapter 70, as many of us probably know, Malden teachers are on strike right now. And I have tremendous sympathy for Malden teachers and also Malden elected officials and the school committee specifically. This is hard. And why is it hard? Because my opponent has failed our community. And how has he failed our communities? Chapter 70 funding is woefully broken. He likes to tout the Student Opportunity Act and claim that that solved everything. It has not. Here's a point. In Malden, they received $54 million in Chapter 70 funding. That's school aid funding for students. They have approximately 6,100 students in that community. Compare that to Chelsea. Economically and very similar in many ways, Chelsea has 25 less students than Malden and has received $104 million in aid. So think about that. Chelsea is getting $104 million in aid for under 6,100 students. Malden is getting $50 million less in aid. And my opponent will claim that he's fighting for our district? He surely is not. We need to do better. We cannot expect these communities to make up the shortfall because of failed policies and practices of people like my opponent.
Thank you. Jason, 1 minute follow-up.
Thank you. I'm so glad my opponent brought up one of the laws that I'm most proud of having authored and championed and successfully, and that is the landmark Student Opportunity Act. This took 10 years of work, and I was very proud as the chair of the Education Committee to help lead its passage in 2019. It was a major victory, heralded by all the education stakeholders, and was signed into law by Governor Baker. That law has unequivocally helped each of the communities in our district. Wakefield is receiving $1 million increase in Chapter 70 funding this year thanks to the passage of that law. Melrose, similarly, about $1 million increase. Malden, who my opponent mentioned, is receiving a close to $3 million increase in their Chapter 70, which is the funding from the state for public schools. That law is also increasing reimbursements for special education, for charter schools. That new law has brought and will continue to bring millions of dollars, tens of millions of additional funding for our public schools in this district.
Thank you. Bob, question to Ed.
Ed, if I could just stay on this topic for one second.
No, question to Jason, I'm sorry, right,
Oh.
yeah.
Jason, if I could just stay on this topic. Wakefield wants to build a new high school. And I think the last estimate that we saw was going to be about $280 million or something like that. But the Mass School Building Authority's reimbursement rate has not kept up with inflation, which means local districts like Wakefield have to pick up a larger share of the escalating costs. What will you, as our legislative representative, do to get the MSBA to pick up a larger percentage of costs and relieve the burden on towns like Wakefield?
This is a critical issue. I'm very proud that I helped to secure the state funding to get Wakefield High School, Stoneham High School, Winchester High School, the Killam Elementary School in Reading, and others into the state school building program, which is known as the MSBA, which is a highly competitive program. And that's great. But it is absolutely true that these school building projects, as well as other construction projects like public libraries, for example, are facing incredible cost escalations and incredible pressure on their budgets. And that's due to supply chain issues, inflation, just the demand for construction workers and materials. So this is a great opportunity for me to show the difference in who will be a more effective state senator for our district, myself or my opponent. So the challenge is we're going to have to figure out a way to get significantly more funding, probably hundreds of millions of dollars more funding from the state to support these school building projects, to make sure that the burden, as you said, is not shifted onto the backs of local taxpayers. What makes me confident that I'm the person who can deliver this? I have built strong relationships in the state Senate. I'm on the leadership team. I serve as vice chair of the Ways and Means Committee, which is our budget writing committee, and as chair of our education committee. I have relationships with the MSBA already and with all of the different education stakeholders that need to be at the table. And I've shown that I can get big things done, like passage of the Student Opportunity Act and paid family medical leave. For months already, I've been working on this issue. I've discussed it with the Senate President, with Senator Rodericks, who chairs the Ways and Means Committee, and with the leadership at the MSBA, including the state treasurer. And I'm confident that I will find a solution. My opponent will have no credibility or influence on this issue.
Thank you.
In fact, he has said he wants to
Thank you.
cut the sales tax, which is how the MSBA is funded.
Thank you.
So that's certainly
Ed,
not a
1 minute
solution.
follow-up.
Well, that's actually not accurate, but I'm not surprised. With respect to the MSBA, this is a huge issue, and I'm hearing about it a lot, especially in Stoneham right now. I have sat through those school building meetings and seen the reactions when you have a project that's been approved by the community, and then you have the committee members trying to find any way possible to cut the project down because of the issues. And where has Senator Lewis been? He's been silent on this. He has been silent. He's not been a champion. He's had 13 years to remedy a very outdated reimbursement formula through the MSBA, and he's failed to do it. So, with all due respect, Senator, to suggest now that you're campaigning on things that you had 13 years to accomplish is a bit disingenuous. And I think all of us can see through that. Sir, you are a career politician who will say things that you think people want to hear, but you don't deliver. And that's the difference. I deliver for my constituents. For 6 years on the Wakefield Town Council, I have gone to bat. I have been a voice for tax relief, for additional senior tax relief, for any opportunity that I can to cut water sewer rates and make life more affordable here. My opponent has done everything he can to tax you more, take more of your money because he believes he knows how to spend it better. This is a significant issue.
Thank you. Next question.
I'm to Ed, right?
You're to Ed now. Yeah. That always happens when we switch. You're to Ed.
I'm stealing this off of the national stage because I thought it was an interesting question. What trait do you most admire about your opponent?
Well, since I have 2 minutes, I may not be able to fill all 2, so if I could just finish my answer on the MSBA, because I think it's important. We also have the Northeast Vocational Technical School.
No. Stay on the question here. Ed
All
is
right.
making the rules and enforcing
I will
them.
answer the question, then we'll move on. I'll say that
Okay.
I think my opponent has a lot of conviction in his beliefs, and I respect that. I think, unfortunately, his values are not aligned with the priorities of our district, and that's where the disconnect lies. I understand what we're going through as a district. I understand what it's like for you and your family today. I understand that it's costing you $500 more every month just to live the way you lived a year ago. I understand that we have seniors that are splitting their pills in half because they can't afford their prescriptions right now. I understand that people are going to fill their gas tanks that are paying twice as much as they had been just a year ago or 2 years ago. I get it. Those are real things. Your energy costs are going to be going up through the roof this winter. We all know that. And I talked to seniors back in July who were preparing for it, who were telling me they were concerned about how they were going to make ends meet. Yet we have this incredible surplus on Beacon Hill that is not going back to the people whose money it is. And my opponent during this time is looking to have an 80% surtax added on to people. So when is tax enough? Beacon Hill cannot even spend the money that it currently has, and it's still looking for more. Why? Ask yourself that. Ask yourself, is this the best we can do? An opponent who wants to stand there and not represent constituents, but instead represent ideology? No, we deserve better. You all deserve better.
Thank you. Jason, do you remember the question?
I think I do.
Thank you.
I wouldn't know what the question was from my opponent's answer, however. I guess he did manage to maybe spend 10 seconds saying something nice about me. What I'm going to say about him is that I appreciate his commitment to public service. Ed, of course, is a town councilor here in Wakefield. We've worked together for a number of years in that role, and I very much appreciate and respect anybody who steps forward in public service. And that's particularly true at the town and city level, because these are positions that in many cases are not compensated at all. Maybe there's a small stipend. And it can be very hard work, takes you away from your family, your loved ones. It can be thankless work at times, but that's critical. That is where government can sometimes do the most good for our citizens at the local level. And at the state level, I'm very proud to partner with our local and municipal leaders. So thank you.
Thank you. Bob?
To Jason, right?
Correct.
Jason, transparency has become an issue of some type in this campaign. Can you explain why you think your stances on, important matters facing the district are more open to the public than Ed's are?
Absolutely. Look, I'm very proud of the track record that I've established in the time that I've served in the state Senate since 2014. It's been a great privilege to represent this district, and I've worked very hard every day to deliver results, whether that's local projects or major legislative victories like universal paid family and medical leave, the Student Opportunity Act. I also believe another important aspect of leadership is being willing to state your positions on important issues of the day loudly and clearly, so that your constituents who put you in office know where you stand, what your values are, what your beliefs are, and what they can expect from you when you're elected. So I've been willing to stand up on issues, whether that is reproductive rights, voting rights, asking the wealthy to pay their fair share, many other issues, gun safety, not because these are popular issues. I know they're contentious. I know when I speak up, I'm going to make some people upset, maybe mad at me, but because I believe that that's the best way to move forward for our communities in Massachusetts. So I state my positions clearly, and I have a track record in the legislature of voting on all of these different issues. And they're on my website as well, if anyone needs to be reminded. My opponent's approach could not be further from mine. He's run a campaign for 7 months. In 7 months, he didn't bother to put a single policy position on his website. Not where he stands on any issue, not what his solutions are to solve the problems facing our district, nothing. Maybe if you searched his social media, you might find a tweet somewhere on some issue. But that's not leadership. Leadership is being honest and transparent and forthright with the voters and the people you hope to represent. I will always continue to do so.
Thank you.
My opponent does not do that.
In the same vein, do you remember the question?
I do.
Okay,
And it's
thank
just, first off, it's just patently false. From the first day I announced my campaign, if you look at my website, I identified the priorities, and I made it clear that I would be listening over the next several months to the people that I would be representing if I'm honored with this position. So it's just patently false. Please go to my website, F-O-R-M-A, edforma.com, and I want you to take a look. I have 10 different priority categories listed there. So what he's saying is false. Check it out for yourself. I appreciate the question on transparency because I think my opponent has been one of the most secretive people on Beacon Hill. And if you look at today's daily item, it'll list some of the ways in which he has. He has voted against additional time for review of proposed legislation before it gets passed. He has also voted against public participation in legislative processes. He has voted against requiring a minimum of 30 minutes to review a bill before it gets passed. If that's transparency, then I think we have two very different definitions. And also, he talks about his issues. I went to his website. He lists issues that go back to 2018. I'm living in the present. And I'll say finally, in closing, that when one of his big issues was talking about gender pay equity.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is an important point, Mr. Moderator.
But your time's up, Mr. Dombroski.
Thank you.
Next question.
Ed, the Orange Line shutdown is complete. As a 30-year rider of the Orange Line, I feel the pain every day. Issues still remain, and they impact the 5th Middlesex District very specifically. The T has scaled down some of its busing as well. What can be done about the MBTA and its issues if you are a state senator?
I should point out that with respect to the Orange Line, we had very different responses. When we knew of the 30-day closure, I reached out to the community and talked about ways to help mitigate the challenges they would be facing in 30 days. My opponent, lawyer mode, my opponent, instead took the position that he was going to stamp his hand down and say, there are failures with the MBTA, we need to do better. Well, goodness, Senator Lewis, where have you been for the past 13 years on this issue? We have ARPA funds. We have $2.2 billion of ARPA funds that hasn't even been spent. Now, had there been, for example, an economic plan related to the T, that would have been queued up. We could have used that money for that, and we still can. So I'll look for ways to be able to make sure that we can improve what needs to be reliable transportation. I agree. We have made improvements relative to that, but we have a ways to go. I mean, this has been an issue that's been decades in the making, but certainly Senator Lewis has done nothing in 13 years. I suspect within 13 months you'll hear a lot more from me on this issue than you have with him in 13 years. And finally, I'll say with respect to the issue of Senator Lewis's website, he talks about the importance of gender equity. Well, I think that also applies to gender pay equity. So many people may not realize this, but in addition to giving himself a big pay raise, which is public record, you can see it, he had a chief of staff. It was a woman. She terminated her employment while pregnant. He then immediately hired a male chief of staff. Same job. One would assume that the hiring would be pretty consistent, right? Same benefits, same compensation. Did you know that his male chief of staff was hired at 37% higher pay than the woman that had been working for him previously? What does that tell you about where his value set is? I would not do that.
Thank you.
I would not give myself a pay raise.
Thank you.
And I would not have that gender inequity.
Thank you very much. Jason,
That is
follow-up.
absolutely
Jason,
disgraceful for my opponent to bring up a personnel issue like that.
It's public record.
There's two completely different people, completely different educational levels and backgrounds. That is completely different from
Same
pay
job.
equity. Please let me speak. It's my turn now.
Yeah.
I also just want to point out that because my opponent basically misled you when he said before, if you go on his website and there are priorities there now. Yes, there are. Do you know when he added those? Last week. Do you know why he added those last week? Because my campaign had been calling out for the last few weeks that, yes, I have been transparent and I am clear about where I stand with the voters on all the important issues, and my opponent in 7 months hadn't bothered to do so. That's why he put them there. I'm sorry, I'm going to run out of time on the MBTA, and this is such a critical issue to the well-being and the future of this entire region. I certainly called out the MBTA for this unprecedented 30-day shutdown. There's no way they should ever have done something like that with such short notice to riders and to our communities. We've got a lot of work to do with the MBTA. We're going to have a new governor in January. I'm very hopeful it'll be Maura Healey. We're going to need new leadership at the MBTA, and we are going to have to provide probably additional funding as well, and I'm committed to doing that.
Thank you. Next question. Gentlemen, let's try and stick with the question, okay? We've got a few moments left here. Next question.
Jason, how can the cities and towns in the district best benefit from your leadership? What do you bring to the table that will help all of us?
What I bring to the table is a track record of strong and bold leadership on a whole bunch of critical issues that matter to our residents, our working families, our municipalities. I've delivered results in the time that I've been in office, both in terms of local projects and initiatives and in terms of big legislative victories. And if re-elected, I will continue to work hard every day to continue to address our challenges. In terms of local results that I've been able to deliver, working collaboratively with our local officials and with other members of the delegation in the communities I represent and with other stakeholders, we've secured millions, tens of millions of dollars. That includes an increased funding for our schools, increased local aid. In fact, in the budget this year, we doubled the increase in local aid over what Governor Baker recommended. I've helped get multiple school building projects into the MSBA program, which is highly competitive, and as I said, I'm working hard now to find a solution to the cost escalation. I've secured funding for investments in parks, playgrounds, and new community gardens, in transportation improvements, roads, intersections, like the horrendous Fellsway Highland intersection in Malden, renovations to Oak Grove, Winchester Center Station. I've also done a lot to secure funding and support for local economic development and downtown revitalization in our communities, like the complete overhaul of Malden's downtown, for example. I will continue, if re-elected, to stay focused on doing whatever I can to bring resources from the state, and when I can help from the federal government as well, to support the needs of our communities. And I will continue to work hard at the statewide level on policies that are going to move our communities forward and improve the quality of life for everybody.
Thank you. Ed, 1 minute follow-up?
I think the biggest difference is I have been in the trenches. I have been in local government for 9 years, 6 of which has been in elected office, 3 years on the finance committee. So I get the issues. I understand the issues that we're talking about in our communities. When I walk around our 6 communities, we're speaking the same language because the issues are the same. Good roads, quality schools, making sure that we have enough well-resourced education, making sure that we have public safety and safe communities. I get it, and I've delivered on those things. You can ask my constituents. For 6 years as their elected official, I've done just that. Now, my opponent talks about things that he has done, but what the challenge is of all the things he has not done. When he says, for instance, that we, and note that, if you play this back again, listen, he says, we've secured, we work together. He didn't file a single budget amendment earmark. Do you know what that means in this current budget? It means that unlike 39 other state senators, he didn't even bother to seek supplemental funding for a single project in our communities.
Thank you. Next question.
Ed, what do you think can be done to address the issues of cost and availability of housing, which is on the mind of so many of your constituents?
I think the biggest thing we can do related to housing costs is to let people keep more of their own money. I think there are a few different ways that we can address this. One of them is, one thing I've noticed oftentimes in walking the streets of our district is how many young homeowners that answer their door have trade trucks in their driveways. And they've gone to the vocational schools, vocational technical education. I'm a huge proponent of that. That matters because that creates educational opportunities for so many within our community. I think as a matter of right, every student should be afforded that opportunity. Right now, over 600 students are trying to get into Northeast Metro Tech and cannot do it. Now, they had actually drafted legislation at Northeast for the new building and given it to Senator Lewis for $100 million of ARPA funds that would have gone to that school and thus lessened our tax burden. What did he do? He hijacked the money for other projects outside of our district. This is how my opponent operates. He doesn't have our constituents in his front view mirror.
Jason, 1 minute follow-up.
Just wanted to go back for a moment. My opponent claimed that I'm not doing everything I can to serve our district because I didn't file amendments to the budget. Do you know why I didn't file amendments to the budget? Because I actually serve on the leadership of the Senate Ways and Means Committee, and I actually help write the budget. So all the priorities for our district, all that funding for those local projects, and that gets baked right in to the Senate Ways and Means budget before it even comes to the Senate floor. I don't have to fight for those amendments on the Senate floor. The residents and the voters of our district benefit from my leadership position because all of the funding and all of those projects are actually included right out of the gate. That's why. On the topic of housing, this is actually one of the most, oh goodness, we're going to run out of time. One of the most challenging issues that we are dealing with and that we have to deal with going forward. And hopefully we can find some more time to talk about this.
Thank you. This probably is our last question, okay? All right, next one.
Okay. The pandemic had by all accounts, a very negative effect on kids' learning. MCAS scores seem to back this up. Do teachers have enough tools to reverse the trend?
I don't think they do. I'm sorry, is
Is
it?
this to me or?
Oh,
Jason.
my
Yeah,
apologies.
to Jason, yeah.
Thank you for this question. There's a lot of very difficult impacts that, of course, the pandemic had on all aspects of our society. But I think none that concerns me more at this point than the impact on our children. We definitely we definitely feared that the pandemic, mostly because of remote learning, would have a very deleterious impact on students' academic achievement and also on their mental health. And unfortunately, that has been borne out by what we've seen from the national tests like NAEP and also from MCAS. And this is particularly true, unfortunately, for students who are already disadvantaged, students who have special needs, students who are English learners, students who come from low-income families with very difficult backgrounds. We have to do everything possible in the months and years to come to help our students and our families recover. Fortunately, there is a lot of funding that is available to our school districts. Fortunately, some of that is thanks to Congress and President Biden for the American Rescue Plan Act they passed, which is provided funding that our schools can use for the next several years, and also because of the passage of the Student Opportunity Act, which was the law that I helped to lead the passage of in 2019, and is increasing state funding for our schools. So our schools need to use those resources to certainly increase staffing, the number of teachers, special education support, to increase pay for our teachers as well, because they do such incredibly important work and helped our kids and families get through the pandemic. We also need to invest more in mental health services, counselors, behavioral health therapists, and so on. A lot of our school districts are doing this already, and we're going to have a continued sustained effort probably for several years to come.
Thank you. Ed, follow up?
Well, I think the most important thing that we can do is just look at the record here. And Chapter 70 has failed our communities. That's the bottom line. To the people of Malden specifically, $54 million to your community in Chapter 70 funding. $104 million to Chelsea. Chelsea has 26 fewer students in their district than you do, Malden. So when teachers, administrators, elected officials are trying to figure out why it is that they can't come to terms, this is why you can't. And Senator Lewis, with all due respect, has had 13 years to do better, and he's failed you. So that is a very big issue. We've had other communities where overrides have been commonplace in order to just fund our budgets. Why is that? Because Senator Lewis has failed you. Overrides are not the way to sustainable budgeting.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to, there was a flip of the coin earlier. You had the first question, correct, Ed?
I did.
Yeah, you're going to, okay, 2-minute closings. You go first. Gentlemen, I hope you have practiced your 2-minute closings so that I don't have to throw you off at all. Okay? Ready? Ready, set, go. You're up. Yep.
I am honored to have received the endorsement of Governor Charlie Baker in this race. Governor Charlie Baker has been a leader who has made all of us proud. I've walked across this district and talked about people saying that they wished he ran for a third term, and I agree. I am that kind of a leader. I'm pragmatic, I'm thoughtful. My client, time and time again on social media and life tries to say, oh, it's a scary Republican. Let's get that out of our heads. I'm a moderate Republican. My opponent is a far-left progressive. That's a big difference. I am speaking to all of you tonight. I call all of you the silent majority. You are the hardworking people of this district who are just trying to get by during incredibly difficult times. I hear you. I am with you. I will be your voice. I will deliver results. Your priorities are my priorities, because that's what this is about. It's about making sure that you respect constituency. My opponent does not. I do. This is the longest job interview because I want to work for you. I want to have the honor of being able to represent the things that matter to you and come back to your communities and say, you know what? I went to bat for you and we got results. Tax relief, support for small businesses, support for education, support for our police, fire, and first responders. More dollars at the state level brought back to our municipal government where it can best be deployed. Because I believe the more money that comes to our communities, our cities and towns, the lower the emphasis is on the tax burden. Higher property taxes are crushing us right now. But that's how we have to sustain our local budgets because of an absence of sufficient funding, and Senator Lewis has been the reason for
Thank you.
that.
Senator Lewis.
Thank you again to WCAT and everybody for participating in this debate tonight. I think it's been a great exchange of ideas and an important opportunity for civic engagement. I'm very proud to have represented our communities in the state Senate since 2014, and I very much hope to continue to have the opportunity to do so for another 2 years. I believe I've delivered a track record in these years of getting results, concrete and tangible results, to make our communities stronger and to improve the quality of life for everybody. I've successfully secured millions of dollars for our communities for a whole host of different projects: new schools, road improvements, public transit improvements, improving parks and playgrounds and community gardens, and arts and culture, and local economic development. I've also achieved major legislative victories for our communities and our Commonwealth and for working families. Passage of the historic Student Opportunity Act in 2019, which is increasing funding for our public schools by millions of dollars, already has and will continue to do so in the years ahead. Successfully, along with former Representative Paul Broder, negotiating a universal paid family and medical leave program, the strongest one in the nation. Passing a law to help support Alzheimer's patients and their families, which the Alzheimer's Association said is a national model. I've done all this by working collaboratively with my colleagues, with Governor Baker and his administration, and with stakeholders all across the Commonwealth. There is a clear choice in this race between somebody with a proven track record who's a leader and willing to stand up and speak loudly and clearly on the issues that matter to our communities, and my opponent, who in 7 months of campaigning didn't mention his position on a single issue. I hope in this election you will give me the great privilege of continuing to serve as your state senator. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that ends our debate this evening for the...
Could I just ask, Mr.
District.
Moderator, in closing,
Pardon?
since we were rushed tonight and weren't able to get through all the questions.
Excuse me. Debate's over. Okay, thank you. I'm going to thank people now, okay?
I'm
Thank
asking
you.
Senator Lewis if you would agree to a second debate since we had a lot of turf we
Debate's
didn't
over.
cover.
Debate's over. You do that on your own time.
Will you do that, Senator Lewis?
You do that on your own time, Ed. You're interrupting my closing here.
Oh, apologies,
I don't
Ed.
appreciate that. Okay, I'd like to thank the candidates. As I say, anytime we have debates here in Wakefield, anyone who throws their hat in the ring and is willing to go through what it takes to campaign and then serve is to be admired. I mean that. I would like to thank the questioners. I'd like to thank Dakota, Antelman, who unfortunately couldn't be here, and for stepping in at the last moment helping us. Bob Burgess, as always, is a treat when you ask questions. I would also like to thank WCAT. For those of you not in town, we're very proud of WCAT. They're a top-notch community television network. I'd like particularly to thank the executive director, Ryan Boyd, who put in a lot of time and effort for this, but more importantly, Allie Houghton, who was the producer of this whole program and did a great job pulling this all together. It's not easy. And I would like to thank you folks for showing the respect and the interest in paying attention here tonight. And I think now give everybody a round of applause for this evening's activity. Thank you. That concludes the debate. And don't forget to vote on November 8th, and you will be able to express your civic duty. Thank you very much. Thanks.